So a semi-final rematch from the last World Cup taking place this weekend, South Africa versus England. Now, England have home field advantage, but will that be enough? That is the question. They have already lost 2 matches in their November internationals, including their most recent up against the Australians, whereas the Springboks, they picked up from the form they had in the Rugby Championship, beating Scotland last week to continue their winning form into this contest. And in this preview, we'll be looking through at the lineups, the key head-to-heads, and also a prediction at the end alongside some stats for who we think will win this game. But jumping straight into it, we will look through at South Africa first, as they did announce their side just a little bit prior to the English, and compared to what we saw last week for Rassie Erasmus up against Scotland, he has made substantial changes to the starting side. 12 changes in total to the starting 15. Only 3 players retaining their spots. That is Oxnashare, Bongio Manambi, and also Eben Etzebeth. But looking through Oxnashare, Bongio Manambi, they are in the front row for this contest, and Wilco Low in there at tight head prop. Now, I saw an interesting stat, and that is that Wilco Low is the 50th Springbok to get an opportunity this year under Rassie Erasmus in terms of his selection. So 50 players have been and gone, some of which have stuck around, others have gone back out of the side due to either injury or form, but Wilco Low becomes the big number 50. And the thing is, they've still got Cameron Honeycomb yet to get his chance, so perhaps he can become 51 in next week's game up against the Welsh. But Wilco Low, he will add something to this front row. He is going up against Ellis Genge, so a great test at international level for him, but I believe he will be up for it. In the locking duo, it is Eben Etzebeth at number 4 and Arge Snyman at 5. In all of the time that Eben Etzebeth has been a Springbok, he has never started a game alongside Snyman, so certainly a big milestone for these two. Eben getting the chance to play with Snyman. Of course, it happens often, but just not. And at that starting side, in the loose forward trio, it is Siya Kolisi at number 6, number 7, Peter Steph-Toy, and number 8, Jasper Wiese. All 3 men coming off the 7-1 split bench for the last week's game up against the Scottish, but now get their chance to be in the starting side. I should also mention Siya Kolisi will be the captain for the Springboks team rather than Etzebeth, who was last week. In the backline, Grant Williams starting at 9 with number 10, Biamani Libbok. People are still worried about that kicking tee of Libbok, but one thing that they are not worried about is that man's attacking prowess. He can score tries, he can set up tries, and he's got great vision. So him versus Marcus Smith, I mean, I'm already giving away a spoiler, but that is one of the head-to-heads to watch out for. In this matchup, Grant Williams normally used as the super sub, but the Springboks, they often use the 5-3 up against the English, and that is exactly what they've done here. So that means that Grant Williams can be in the starting side rather than having to cover multiple positions off of the bench. In the centre pairing, Damien Dialendi starts at 12 with number 13 being Jesse Creel, the stock standard duo, but the world-class one at that for the South African side. Kurtley Arendse moves to the left wing to replace Makazole Mapimpi, who overall had a pretty solid game up against Scotland last week. Number 14, Cheslin Colby, replacing Caden Moody, who falls into that same boat as Makazole Mapimpi. He was great under the high ball, and that's actually something that some felt would be enough to keep Moody in this side. But of course, with Rassie, when he rotates a team, he drastically changes them, averaging, I believe, about 8 or 9 switches per lineup that he's done all throughout the year. So this one was going to be no different. And number 15, Apelele Fasi, with no Willie Leroux off the bench. That means Leroux at best can be on 99 caps at the end of 2024, just one away from the century. But the 5-3, like I said, for the Springboks, notable names off that bench. Of course, Malcolm Marx is there at 16. They've decided to go without a specialist lock off the bench, but that is due to the cover that Peter Steph-Toy does offer you, which means that they can have Eldrick Lowe as well as Quagga Smith as 2 forward replacements. But jumping straight into the English lineup now, they did announce it just a little bit after the Springboks did, and this English side, they've made quite a few changes compared to what we saw last week up against the Australians, most of which expected, but overall a pretty strong English lineup. Number 1, Ellis Genge. Number 2, Jamie George. And number 3, Will Stewart. So the stock standard front row that we have seen from England for quite some time. In the locking duo, Maro Itoje at number 4 and number 5, George Martin. Now, Maro Itoje somewhere where he can try and really disrupt the South Africans in this game is at line-out time. But of course, South Africa, they have their own players who are very good at line-out steals, and with how close the games normally are between these two sides, could be the difference maker in the loose ball trio. Number 6, Chandler Cunningham himself. Number 7, Sam Underhill. Of course, there was never going to be Tom Curry for this game due to the head knock that he did get last week up against the Australians. And number 8, it is Ben Earl. At number 9, they've gone Jack Van Poortvliet coming in for Ben Spencer from last week's game. Number 10, Marcus Smith, the X Factor for the English. I don't think that man could have done much more than what he did last week up against Australia. He was getting his kicks right, had a huge amount of running meters, but sadly the rest of his team just weren't up to that same level. In the midfield, it is Henry Slade at number 12 and Ollie Lawrence at number 13. Now, I'll be honest, I really do prefer when Lawrence is at 12 and Slade's on the outside. Definitely in this matchup, stylistically, I think that Dialendi versus Ollie Lawrence, both as the 12s, would have worked a lot better. But I guess they're backing Henry Slade to be able to stop Dialendi. But that is a big task. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Number 11, Ollie Slateholm, who did very well off the bench last week. Of course, no Emmanuel Fiwa-Bosso due to his injury. Number 14, Tommy Freeman. And number 15, Freddie Stewart coming in for George Furbank. So England making quite a few switches, like I said, but nowhere near as many as the South Africans. But now we move on to the head-to-heads, and we'll start with that 10 jersey. Marcus Smith versus Manie Libbok. Two men who know how to play entertaining rugby. Libbok, his kicking gets criticised, but other than that, he is just an X-Factor player with the way that he finds gaps and uses his vision up against a side like England, who conceded a lot of points last week up against Australia. I think Libbok can really help them find those gaps. But the big thing will be for Manie Libbok not to go too crazy too early. We've seen in some past games, he starts to go for cross kicks from the very first minute, and sometimes it works, sometimes it can backfire. For the English, they will probably be going for the same thing, to be honest, with Marcus Smith at 10. He'll be looking for those cutout passes, the little dinks in behind the Springbok defence, which is something that we haven't seen too many sides try, but maybe they should, seeing as the Springboks' defensive wall just doesn't normally let sides through. We saw 2 games in a row that Scotland have been unable to score a single try, and England, even in defeat up against Australia, still managed to score quite a few. But that is the first head-to-head. The second one is Maro Itoje versus Eben Etzebeth. Now, Etzebeth had a lot of good things to say about Maro Itoje. He said that he hopes he's ready for this game, but also that one day he'd like to play alongside him. And all I'm going to say is that locking duo would be extremely scary for any side going up against them. Etzebeth with that physicality, that winner's mindset. Maro Itoje great at a line-out steal, and then partnering with those two, Arge Snyman for the South Africans, George Martin for the English. Of course, there aren't many forwards in world rugby that offload the ball like Snyman does, so I think that will be another aspect of the Springboks game, and there's just a multitude of layers in which, if they are all working well, Springboks could have a lot of success for this matchup. And then the last head-to-head that I'm looking at, it is going to be Ben Earl versus Jasper Wiese. Now, Earl overall, throughout the November internationals thus far, he's been busy, but he hasn't been as busy as we saw last year. He was the leading carrier in the Six Nations. He's normally topping a majority of the stats for England, but I think he has found it a little bit difficult to adapt in these last 2 games. Jasper Wiese, the big man, makes his way off the bench last week. Didn't have a huge impact, but when he starts a game, he's normally physical from the very first whistle, and I don't see a game up against the English with that rivalry being there. I don't see it being any different for Jasper Wiese. He will be throwing himself at the line, but will he be able to get through Chandler Cunningham himself, Sam Underhill, and also Ben Earl? I think so. But that now takes us perfectly through to our prediction. Now, the last 5 times that these two sides have played, they have been separated by only 1 point on 3 occasions. 60% of the time of the last 5, these two sides, only 1 point is what wins or loses aside the game. So it just shows how important the kicking will be, and then that is what comes back onto Manie Libbok. If he can get all his kicks over early, it'll be fantastic for South Africa. They've got the security of Handré Pollard to make his way off the bench later. But Manie Libbok, he's been working on that kicking. It's just whether or not in a pressure situation he can nail those kicks. For England, they are getting used to losing by a thin margin. Losing narrowly last week up against Australia. Same can be said about the week prior up against New Zealand. And it just seems to be that one extra little step that the English have been struggling to take, whether it's a missed penalty or a missed drop kick or a missed opportunity like we saw up against the Wallabies. But England needs someone to step up late and finish a game for them, because that's something that we've seen South Africa do time and time again throughout the last 2 years. When it's close and it's going down to the wire, the Boks always find that way of getting over the line. So that is what I believe will give them the edge in this game, and that is why I'm predicting South Africa to win this game 24 points to 19. I think it's going to be relatively close, but I do think that the Springboks will be strong enough, and honestly, I could see South Africa scoring in the 30s for this game. If England's defence is not 100%, we're going to see South Africa running in quite a few more tries than I have predicted. So that is also something to keep in mind. But England also have a way of keeping games close. So that's why a 5-point margin to the Boks, I feel, won't be a terrible shout there. But of course, do let me know your score predictions in the comments down below, as well as the head-to-head battle that you are looking forward to the most. This game kicking off at 6:40 a.m. New Zealand time, 7:40 p.m. for you guys in South Africa on Saturday night. It's going to be a great one, and we will be doing the commentary on the channel as well. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.